Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me as I explore my own astrological midlife by speaking with all sorts of inspiring people about their life and work, and how what happened in their astrological midlife helped get them to where they are today. If you're new to the show, welcome. You can follow me on social media as Sarah Marlowe Spence, and you're welcome to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. As an extra bonus at the end of each show is some original music. Astrological midlife, so what's that? It relates to Western astrology transits that run from the mid-30s to the mid-40s for everyone. Each of the four main midlife transits have an overall theme, though details do vary by generation and by individual because of your time of birth. I'm right in the middle of these four main midlife transits and learning lots, especially from my guests on the show. If you're interested in more on these midlife transits, do check the show notes because we do have a past episode with an astrologer where we delved into those specifically. But drum roll please! Unraveling Midlife passed its official 1-year anniversary between episodes 13 and 14, this one being 14. So happy birthday to Unraveling Midlife and happy astrological new year. When the sun moves into Aries, which it did at the equinox recently, it's known as the astrological new year, with Aries being the first sign of the zodiac. This particular show is released on the powerful Aries new moon, and this interview was actually recorded the day that the sun went into Aries, so lots of new beginnings. My guest today is an incredible musician and astrologer that I have much respect for. Kāren Hunter, also known as Kāren, in the past known just as Hunter Deleuze, a highly talented musical chameleon, as we talk about in the interview. These days, as well as performing, which of course hasn't been the easiest with the many recent limitations on gathering with others, she teaches music online and offers astrology readings. Here is Kāren Hunter talking music and astrology, two of my favourite things. Welcome to Unraveling Midlife, Kāren. It's great to have you here. So tell us a bit about you.
Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you so much for inviting me to come along and be part of your podcast. I've listened to bits of some of the other ones just in my preparation, and I think they sound fantastic, so I'm quite excited. I am a musician, first and foremost, and a music teacher, and also an astrologer. So I'm, I guess, a creative soul and a bit of a free spirit. I live at the moment on Waiheke Island. I grew up in Auckland City, and ancestrally my people are from Cornwall, which is the southern tip of England, and also there's plenty of Irish and Scottish people in the family line as well. So I'm a Pākehā New Zealander.
Like many of us.
Yep, like you. But just for anybody not listening, that's, who's not from New Zealand who listens, that's the term that the Indigenous people, the Maori people of New Zealand, use to refer to those of us who came as usually in the late 1800s, the families that came as the original settler families, or those people who came back at that time and whose descendants have been here for 4 or 5 generations. So that's what Pākehā New Zealand is all about for anybody listening from another country, not this one.
Yeah. No, I first met you as a musician. I think I'd just bought the same guitar as you had or something like that.
Was that the little Martin?
Yes.
How is your little Martin?
Oh, it's gone along. It's going along. It probably doesn't get played as much as it should, but yeah, I have a ukulele to play with now as well. So.
You've got to service them all, eh? They all need to be touched. They all need to be played. They're instruments that sit around in the room and just like look at you from underneath a pile of dust saying, play me, play me, play me. Yeah, those ones.
Yeah, but I like having the instruments. I was talking with someone recently. We like having the instruments sitting out, so at least it reminds us that there's music, like rather than them being hidden away somewhere or in a case. Yeah. And I mean, how many instruments do you play?
Well, it's an interesting point, because I get kind of excited about an instrument, and then I'll spend, up a few years playing it, and then I might not be able to maintain it and learn something else. So I've been studying the guitar mainly all my life. Like, I started when I was 9 and still play now. But before that, my parents tried me on the violin and the piano and the clarinet. So the guitar was like my fourth instrument. So I'm from a musical family. And then since then, I've also, I play the mandolin, the ukulele. I spent about 5 years learning the violin as an adult, and just, that's incredible master instrument. I suppose after learning it as a child, as a toddler, as a 3-year-old, I had always wanted to actually learn it properly. So I spent about 5 years learning Celtic tunes on it a few years ago. But it's the sort of thing that you have to maintain a lot. So now I am actually studying the silver flute, like the concert flute, which is my latest passion, rather than the violin. But I still have my violin, and yes, I keep it out and look at it, and occasionally play some long notes on it. So there's probably other things too, like frame drums and djembe and jaw harps and bells, and all the things, all the good things,
all the things you're turning around and looking at.
yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I've always really appreciated about your music is that every so often you reinvent yourself, and you're playing with different people in a slightly different style, a different instrument thrown in, and I love that. I love that, because the variety. And I spotted you with the flute recently when I saw you play. I'm like, this is the latest.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I'm really inspired. I grew up really inspired by David Bowie, and he was a chameleon, and he would do that. He would do just that, reinvent himself all the time. And he was my favorite artist when I was growing up, really. And that's what I just really never saw, that you couldn't do that. And I think it's reinvention, creative reinvention is the spice of life. It's what gives me energy to keep going. And I do just that. I will go into the void, where I will completely close down all logic and all linear thought, and I will invent, what do I want my life to feel like for a little while. It's not what do I want the music to sound like, it's what do I want it to feel like. Okay, so what instrument or what genre or what people, what do I need to be playing in order to make my music, my life, feel that way? And then I'm guided by that. That's how I write music, and that's how I create albums, and it's all from the feeling, the atmosphere.
And so how has astrology, like, when did that come into your life, and how does it working with the music?
Well, the first time I ever heard of astrology, I would have been about 6 or 7, and somebody came up to me with a book in my street and said, "When's your birthday?" And I said, 28th of October. And they looked in the book and they said, "You're a Scorpio." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm nothing that you've got in your book," and turned around and hurried away, which is just the perfect Scorpio answer to that question. That's the first, I remember that very clearly. And the next thing I remember is at about 14, 15, I went to an alternative school, Auckland Metropolitan College, and we were really encouraged to pick our own courses. Like it wasn't, you were given a whole bunch of choices of courses that you could do, and we chose our own courses. So I was already used to doing workshops and courses at school, and I saw up the road there was an astrological centre of some kind, and they were offering a night course. And I was about 14, and it wasn't actually in my daytime school, but I decided I would do that course as part of my school work. So I did that at like an evening class, and I did it I guess I would have done a few of them, because once I get onto something, if I like it, I stick with it. So at around about 14, 15, I was studying astrology. And also when I was at some point, there was this witches' shops started to pop up around the place. There was a place called Dragon's Den in the 90s that was in Mount Eden Road, and they were, there was a lot of astrology people, crystals and witchy spells and things in that shop. That really interested me too. And then I would often go and have astrological readings. And I was really exploring. I actually had one of my favorite astrologers at that time in the 90s was one of your other future guests, Francella Sofsky-Weiber. And I would go and see her, and I would be always like testing, what can you ask? Like, I wanted direction. I really wanted to know, what the hell should I be doing? Like, should I be touring, or should I be staying home, or should I be making an album, or what should I be doing? And I loved the way that she could never actually answer those kinds of questions. She would always just force me to look at my life purpose and who I was and what I really wanted to do as a soul, as a spirit. And then how she was like guiding me to allow the material things in life to arrive after making those important decisions about what are we really here for. So that was when the sort of first tension started to creep in for me. Like, is astrology a mundane thing, or is it an esoteric thing? Like, what is it? So I got really enthusiastic about it when I was working with her. I never considered reading for other people, though. I mean, for years and years, I've been watching podcasts and doing courses and reading books, and always, I do charts for my friends or talk about with my friends, always really excited. Somebody would bring the North Node book home and we'd read it, and then I'd love learning all about it. Then I would go around analyzing, and people would love to hear what I had to say. But it actually wasn't until the lockdown, like last year, when I was suddenly in lockdown and unable to earn money as a music teacher and as a musician, I really had to think, what am I going to do? And that's when the idea of reading for people professionally came along, and it just came very easily. Like, it didn't take much. So you're on the right track when you do something and that comes back quite easily. I think just before that, I'd done a couple of workshops at the festivals, actually astrology workshops at the festivals that year, because that's the other thing I like to change all the time, right, is what I offer at the festivals for workshops, if it's songwriting or facilitation training. Then I started doing the astrology workshops at festivals. So then I started doing readings for people. So I'm quite new to the reading, professional reading for other people. It's just a couple of years, but I've had quite a lot of clients, and during all these lockdowns, people want to know. And my approach is a little bit like what I learned from Francella with regard to, although very different methodology, but the idea of not so much telling you the mundane things that are going to happen in your life, but it's really guiding people towards what the incarnation that we've come here and really needs in order to evolve. It's very much about the evolution of the soul and the life path from that perspective. That's what lights me up. Yeah.
And how do music and astrology fit in together for you? Are they separate? Are they intertwined?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Sarah. And I guess not something that I've given a lot of thought to. I've been a musician like all my life. That is my main occupation. Like that, most of my study, my university study, most of my life, most of my career has been as a professional musician. So the astrology has run alongside that as an interest, but not as something that I have. The music was always more. I guess it's just called me stronger. It felt much more of an obvious life path for me. It had just more juice in it. It wasn't really a consideration for me to work with astrology with other people until it was. And when it was kind of because I couldn't work with music. But now I do feel differently about it. Like, I think that was the circumstances that set up me sort of needing to find that realization. It sort of like came imposed from the outside. But now that I'm here, I am finding that the connections that I can have with people, in a sense, there is an element of music to an astrological reading. There's an aspect of improvisation, because we have kind of like in music, you might have you write a song, or you know how the song is supposed to be played, but in the interpretation that you have in the moment, it might come out quite different. That's like an astrology reading. I can do a whole bunch of research and sit down thinking, this is what's important, this is what's important, this is what's important. 2 minutes into the reading, actually being with the person and feeling into who they are and what their needs are, I might think, actually, that's not what's important. I need to talk about this. What else is similar? Music and astrology, just as I'm talking, I'm realizing that there's an aspect of sensitivity. There's a sensitivity to the person who's receiving their experience. So when giving an astrology reading, that the utmost care is necessary to create a situation where the querent, the person asking the questions that you're reading for, they are trusting you with in a place of complete vulnerability, allowing you to sort of tread through their earliest memories, for example, or some of their darkest nights, in order to help find the light or help find the moments of transformation. So in music as well, in performing music, there is an aspect of incredible sensitivity to the experience of the audience and to where the audience needs to go. Though it is different, because as a musician, it tends to be more guided. Like, I know where I want to take you as a musician. I want to take you into some form of mystery, some magic world, some otherly place. So I will do these things that I think will arrive at the place where we are there together. Whereas as an astrologer, it's really the person, you, for example, you're guiding me. It's like you're guiding me, and I'm dancing or using words that and images that help. And I can feel, it's like I can feel with the same part of me that feels music. I can feel when I'm on track. Sometimes I might be reading for somebody and I will start to cry. I will feel emotion because I'm talking about something, and I get a glimmer, and it's like I am guided by what's happening for that person, even though they're on the other side, usually of a computer screen. So there's a lot of mystery there. That they are different. They are different, but there are similarities.
I wonder if one of the similarities would be that both astrology and music uses like a logic base of how to do something, but then always has that sensitivity and intuition, like it's a left-right brain match that you need to use both sides.
Yeah, that sounds good. What took me like 5 minutes to say, you said in one sentence. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have said it unless you'd been talking for that 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, but I think that's right. We're on the same page now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that you were actually the first person who mentioned anything about these astrological midlife transits to me, back when I was having a hard time in my Pluto square, and you're like, maybe it's an astrology transit thing. There's this thing called Uranus opposition. I went off and I learned about them and went, oh, right, there's a series of them. And that was right at the beginning. And now I'm in the middle, still kind of waiting for Uranus to speed up and bang me in its opposition kind of shake up.
Right, is that where you're at now?
Yeah. How was your midlife? How did it affect your life? All those
so you what you suggested I do was to just go back and see exactly the dates of when we had things happen. So the first one, that the Pluto square Pluto, this for me, I was 36 at this time. So and it went, there was a retrograde as well, so it actually went for a full year and a half basically, that it was popping around on the degree, so probably would have even been a little bit longer. So 36 was the year. I always knew that I would turn 36 in the year 2000. I always knew that I would, so I was 36 so the Pluto square started in March 2001, or more or less. So I always knew what I would be doing in the year 2000 and had 36 years to prepare for it. But I had given no thought whatsoever to what would happen in the years to follow. And I had already achieved most of the things that I had planned with regards to my musical career. I mean, I had done a lot of playing, a lot of tours, a lot of gigs, a lot of albums, and I had had a lot of amazing musical experiences by that time. And it was all going quite well, like I had a great band and we were starting to get, good gigs, and it was satisfying, but there was a sense in me that there needed to be a change. Then it was I was no longer moving up. It felt like I was now either plateauing in some way inside myself spiritually, or on the other side of it. It just felt like I had, to a certain extent, because the music industry is very competitive, and it is takes a lot of energy to maintain the promotions necessary to keep the machine going. And I felt that I was kind of over it. Now, it's not that I was over playing music. I will never be over playing music, but I certainly was over pushing myself as a personality and hustling. I was over hustling, and that's something that really came from the inside. So what I did at that point is that because I've always known, so when you come to a standstill with something, you can either drop it or you can go deeper. I decided I would try going deeper, so I went to university. I hadn't gone to university out of school because I'd gone straight into playing music. So that I was living in Australia by the time I was 18, already just doing as much band stuff as I could, and then sort of went over to England and more travel. So I had not done any university study, and I was teaching though. So I was asked to teach a course at a place called Mains, the Music and Audio Institute of New Zealand, while I was teaching this course, which was things like guitar as a second instrument and voice as a second instrument, these kind of classes. I realized that the students were learning things I didn't know. And I was really interested by that, particularly with music theory and with oral training, that I didn't have the skills that they had, that they were learning. So I decided to enroll as a student in the second year of that course. So that's what started. I did 1 year of a diploma, and then I went to university and did a BA and a B Perf Arts, and then a honours and a master's in music, and started until I was teaching at the university. So I went in deeper into I learned about jazz. I had never studied jazz before, and jazz is something that you have access to if you take on music theory. And so in order to do that, I had to learn all the things, all the different scales and different improvisation techniques. And it was a very deep dive, as tertiary study is. It was a very deep midlife dive into not just music, but being at university, ending up being one of the teachers on those courses.
So a bit of culture shock, but that must have made you such an amazing musician, even more so, because jazz is hard, and every jazz musician I've ever met is incredible because you have to be to play jazz.
Yeah, well, I'm not a jazz musician, but I did do some of the courses, so I know how to talk to jazz musicians. I know how to write the music and set things up so that I can play with jazz musicians. In order to do that, I did do 2 years on the jazz course as a guitarist, so I know what I can and can't do. I did learn a lot. Like I can fulfill some roles within jazz, but it's more that I learned some things that I could take into my music. And certainly in terms of the theory and the oral skills and the improvisation skills, I learned heaps. Yeah, but no, I'm absolutely not a jazz musician. It's a dark art, yes.
So during that Pluto square, when you were like reinventing yourself, and sometimes they say that the Pluto square helps you confront your biggest fear. Did you?
I think I have new biggest fears all the time. Like there's a lot of fear out here in the world.
Being human.
Yeah, being human involves a lot of fears. So I don't know about that. I mean, there were fears, perhaps not the biggest one. So let me just take out the word biggest and go, did I confront some fears? Sure. The fear of, there was some stuff around, like a lot of the students I was studying with were, half my age, and younger people. So I had to face things around being, redundant, being old in comparison. I had to face stuff around interacting with people who I had got to a point where I wasn't really interacting a lot with young people in their early 20s. At that point, I was 36, 37, 38, around that sort of territory. I didn't really have a lot to do with people in their late teens and early 20s, and I had to this was a crash course. This was the majority of my workmates, of my schoolmates were young people, and that was a huge change for me. And that is something that I have very much learnt from, and now my life is populated with people from all ages. So that was a big thing, breaking down that just interacting with people in my own generation. That was a big thing that I had to learn how to do. And I guess appreciating, when I say the music industry is quite competitive. So, but in these courses that we would do, we really we listened to each other, we appreciated each other. There was healthy competition, but we worked a lot not to, to realize that we were all different, that we had different gifts. We played different styles of music. We had different personalities. So yeah, there was some fears that I had to go through around that. And perhaps, Pluto is also about power and about there's an element of darkness to Pluto. So I did certainly have to grapple with letting go of earthly power, because I think I was on a trajectory working in the music industry of wanting to accumulate power. As when I say what I mean is influence, or to build myself up. There's a set of sort of something around wanting to have that sense of I've made it, or I've put myself in a position where I have some magnetism, some personal power. And then I had to go through a process of letting that go in order to, I had to let go of my ambition. I had to retire my ambition. It wasn't serving me anymore. And by studying now with people who are, near 18 or so years younger than me, and most of the time I had to let go of needing to have power over people and learn how to share power. And I don't know if everybody who's listening to this is going to understand what I mean by power. So I can only say, I don't mean like being powerful. I mean personal power. It's different. So I just, in good faith, I'm using these words. But I think that was a big thing that I had to learn how to let go of. Yeah, with status and power.
I can relate to that. And how about the Uranus opposition? That's another biggie, and that's the one that you'd mentioned to me that time.
Yeah, well, I always think, I think that the Uranus, I tend to think of it as it's quite broad. So I think it kind of comes in. I'm of the generation that has Pluto and Uranus conjunct. So I've got them both conjunct in Virgo, because I was born in 1964. So they were just coming into their strong conjunction in 65. So that they're totally waxing in. So it kind of like Pluto square Pluto was also Pluto square Uranus. And my Uranus opposite, and I have the two opposite Chiron as well. So I have Pluto conjunct Uranus, and they're both opposite Chiron in the year I was born. So anything that hits one hits them all. So the Uranus opposition flavor for me is the if there is something that you haven't done yet, now's the time you're going to do it. There might be something that you're sitting on that you've always sort of considered in the back of your mind, but possibly, well, in my case, going back to school, going to university. I hated school. I hated it as a kid. I was so bored at school, even at the alternative school. It was just killing time for me. I couldn't get out of there fast enough, and if I didn't have to go, I wouldn't. And I would go somewhere else. I spent so much time at op shops, at markets, Cook Street Market in those days. On Fridays, I would just be there every week, all day. That was Fridays, wasn't even a day. I would go to the movies in town. I saw The Last Waltz like 7 times. I saw the Hair movie 10 times, all during school time. I had no interest in being there at all. So for me, deciding university wasn't even a consideration. It was like, why on earth would I want to do that? It would be like a horror. So for me, the thing of, I suppose, in my family, my parents had met pretty much at university or just beforehand. They'd gone to university together, the same university, the same music department that I ended up in. So it was going and being a student in a tertiary institution. For me, that was my Saturn return. So my Uranus opposition.
And you would have been at university for a while too, doing an undergraduate and a master's.
Yeah,
wow.
That's right. Yeah. So around February 2007, which I was at the age 43, around about then. This is when the opposite Uranus was strong, and it was also, of course, conjunct Chiron. Yeah. So Uranus conjunct Chiron. So this is pretty much when I was finishing my last year of study, and then I did a couple of years of teaching. So I did a couple of years lecturing as was called a senior tutor role. It was about 20 hours a week, and they're like an assistant to the people running the course. So that was, I suppose, another climax, really, of energetic climax, another moment where I reached the pinnacle of what I had set out to do at the beginning of that journey. And then a couple of years later, in 2010, I gave it away. Like I just realized I felt that I had done it. So I did the thing that needed to be done, which was finally Kāren went to friggin' school. That was the thing I needed to do. Some men need to go and buy a red sports car, or some women might need to get a boob job. I just needed to go to school. So I did it. And then in 2010, I just felt so bored in my soul, and I was still going through all the motions, but my heart was just full of absolute boredom. I wasn't handling it emotionally at all, just the day in, day out kind of grind of it. And I went to a bar and met some musicians from a foreign country who just seemed way more interesting than anybody else that I knew at that time. I think I'd left my job 2 months later and just gave up everything and started living in a van with them, and ended up traveling overseas. So it's like I always probably will be a bit of a wanderer and a bit of a chameleon, but at least I managed to hold for that midlife period, that particular midlife period, managed to hold a vision, which was, I actually held some stability.
I remember that band. I saw you perform probably at Prana Festival.
At Prana. Yeah. They were wild people, but it was great. Yeah, so, and in the middle of all that, so the Neptune square Neptune was actually pretty much that same time as well, December 2006. Yeah, so that was all happening at the same time. I think the Neptune square Neptune energy, I do remember when I was coming up to some final performances on my performing arts degree, I can remember feeling that I really didn't understand what it was we were supposed to be doing. like, what were we doing? I know we'd prepared for exams before, we prepared for performances. I'd done screeds of them, but I had a feeling I just don't really understand what we're doing. Like I couldn't quite get it. And so I remember that Neptune square, Neptune energy is kind of being a little bit at sea, pretty lost, a little bit at sea. And for anybody who might be going through that right now at this time, that Neptune is conjunct, virtually conjunct Jupiter and Pisces at the moment, I feel awash now, and that's not happening to me. But if that's what's happening for you or other people listening, then yeah, the feeling of being awash and if I could look back on her now, I would say to her, just take a year off, and don't worry about trying to be to fit into anything right now. Like, this is the year to make art and to write, not to do some exams and some performance exams and to get stressed. It's almost like I couldn't even get stressed. I really wasn't thinking logically at all, and those particular set of performances were not good for me at all. I remember that was hard. It was hard because I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I didn't really do very well. There's a few times I bombed. So they were accompanied of real feelings for me of self-judgment, and of just feeling like feeling broken, feeling like I'd really missed some important instructions. I gave myself a real hard time, during some of that as well. And that's what can happen when you're studying at university. You can give yourself a really hard time if you don't do well. So I definitely, felt that.
Not just at university.
True, but particularly so there, because there's all the, there's exams and there's competition and there's stress and you've paid for the course, and particularly so. Yeah.
Indeed.
And I guess after that, the next sort of set of midlife transits is the Chiron return, which started for me around May 2013 till about January 15. So the Chiron return, it's like facing that primary wound, facing that core wound, and taking responsibility for it. Now, I was studying astrology at that point. I knew what was happening. So I have I don't know if it's my only core wound, but I have an abandonment wound. I'm from a split family, like many people, so that affected me a lot. So I had the opportunity to go to my recently ex-partner's wedding in Germany, and I took it. I went over there. I went to this wedding, and I was over there for about 5 months, traveling around with him and a whole group of people and his fiancée, and then I was at the wedding. For me, that was my kind of like where I allowed myself to work the muscle of the Chiron return. It was like working the abandonment wound, facing up to it, and miraculously I survived. I still lived and breathed, but there was a lot of it was quite excruciating to let go of that person at that time, but also I was really cognizant of what was happening. I knew this was my Chiron return, and I felt a lot of heartbreak around letting go of that particular relationship. I did feel a set of some abandonment things came up, but I was working it consciously, so I allowed myself. I wanted to dance at the wedding, and I did it. So so I came back in one piece, but that was a tender experience. I think the Chiron return for women, especially because it so often coincides with menopause, I've noticed that my generation is more aware of menopause than my mother's generation. Many women in my mother's generation will say, I didn't notice menopause. They didn't even notice it happening. But my generation is usually pretty aware of the change, and because the Chiron return often hits around about the same time, there is a lot of that understanding how age works, understanding how you no longer turn the same amount of heads as you would have once before. And that I don't just mean being sexually attractive, I just mean being noticed as a human, walking into a bank or a shop, and once upon a time people would have acknowledged approvingly that I joined the queue even, or made sure, and that now that there might not even be a nod of the head, and I'm realizing that it was because I was taking up space now as an older woman, not as a young attractive woman, and just the difference in society and the place of older women in society, that's probably something that's familiar to lots of women coming into their Chiron return. That's just a part of it. Yeah, it's just a part of it.
I'm not even there, but it angers me. Like, I remember someone, a colleague a few years ago saying, oh, nobody looks at you once you're 40. And I was, 36 or 37 at the time. And I looked at her, my face in shock, and she saw the shock registered on my face. And she said, well, maybe 45, but don't worry, it's coming. And I went, oh my God, I can't believe that I live in a society where there's so much ageism and there's so much youth worship. And I was working with that kind of material in aged care at the time, so it was really in my face. And
look, Sarah, I think it's really deep. Personally, I tend to think it's about reproduction. I think that when we are fertile, we are more people notice us more because we're fertile, because we're potential mates. And when we are no longer fertile, we hold a different space in society. And I just think it's the way, because it's universal. It's just so common that's how people are. I don't think they learn it. I just think it's just instinctual reaction, and then but it is up to us, those of us who are aging, to carry ourselves with self-respect, to not turn it on ourselves. That's the trick, to not turn away from ourselves. And of course, just like you don't have to be even gay people feel homophobia, right? And even Black people feel racism, right? Well, even old people or people aging feel ageism. And this is the thing that we need to deprogram, is letting go of what other people's reactions are, what other people think, and keeping the pride in ourselves and loving ourselves. That's what it all comes down to in the end. But yes, in that Chiron return, that was a time where I really had to grapple with that. And that was big. And now I'm coming up to my second Saturn return, which will be exact in 2023, and it will coincide with, and just like it will coincide with Pluto opposite Moon. So Saturn return and Pluto opposite Moon are going to happen in 2023. So those are big together.
Well, Pluto anything transits are all big,
Pluto opposite Moon. Pluto opposite Moon. So I've already lost 2 dear friends who are my own age this year. 2 incredibly good friends. One of them was a musician I played with in a band when I was in the early 90s, Lorraine Horstmanshoff from Spinning Wheel. She's recently passed. And earlier this year, an incredible woman who was also an astrologer and an amazing psychic, an amazing facilitator and a sculptor, an artist, Carolyn Robinson. Very good friends of mine have both passed. And another one of my friends over in England is telling me at the moment that she has a terminal diagnosis. And I am looking at these transits and going, okay, this is the time where now it's time to to make use of every single day. And if somebody said to me recently, Amy McComb, the herbalist, said to me recently that, really we're here to learn how to be happy before we die. So this is, this is the time. This is the time in my life when I have this whittle, this challenge now to make positive. And it's as tricky as it ever was to do that, but this is the challenge. So this is, I know that's what my life is about now, and hopefully these transits will go really, really well, and I'll just get really, really responsible, and my Pluto opposite Moon will just be a transformation of what it is to my deepest, darkest femininity, and I'll still be here in 20 years' time. But looking, it does look a little bit foreboding, sort of on the outset, to look at those two things coming at the same time with the year that I've had this year regarding my friends. Yeah.
I know. I flick through the ephemeris, which shows all the planets and positions, and I look through this month. For example, before I went to bed, I decided to read the ephemeris just for fun. And then I was thinking about how a year ago I was looking forward, and how life is so different to how I might have thought, or when I was looking at it a year ago or 2 years ago. Oh, what will life be like then? And I try and imagine it, because I've got lots of air in my chart. And then I reflect that life never turns out how you expect. And you can prep all the astrology podcasts and videos, and I like to do that too, and like you do, and then I wonder, like, what will that feel like to actually
exactly.
go through it? And it's a bit of a practice for me, is what does this feel like? And there's been a few transits which I've been, oh wow, I know what this transit is, I can feel it, and then there's others that I just haven't quite got. Earlier, you mentioned the upcoming Jupiter and Neptune transit. So that's what I was thinking of when I was speaking just now. But do you want to talk a little bit about that one? Because it's coming up.
It just sounds amazing. And I can really feel it coming in already. We're just leaving Pisces season and coming into Aries time, but with Jupiter and Neptune coming up to conjunct in Pisces, it's like the traditional ruler and the modern ruler of Pisces dancing in divine union in their sign, which is the sign of the boundaryless ocean, and the ocean of art and love and imagery. It's of the ability to communicate without words, incredible sensitivity. I think it's a time for prayer and acknowledgement of what lies beyond what is visible, to go deep into the world of the mystery, deep into the world of love. It's a time of love, not necessarily just love between two people, but love between oneself and the earth, love between oneself and the ocean, between humanity as an ocean. Yeah. How to plug in, how to play one's part, how to be one of the school of fishes, just one fish in a school of 5 billion, 7 billion. Here we are, all swimming together and being part of something much, much bigger than us. And I think it's important to trust at this time, to trust in the wisdom of the communities, trust in the wisdom of the body, that we are where we need to be, whatever that is, and to allow ourselves to pray and trust that we're being guided, and we are being led by our prayers, by our best intentions. We're being called forward by the intentions that we set as we walk, as we float. Yeah, it's definitely a time that we'll be floating. Of course, there's could well be a very confusing moment coming up for people during this time, during mid-April. Could be very confusing for lots of, if people are needing to understand and needing to have explanations for things, needing to know when something is going to happen and why something happened, they're probably going to be out of luck. And for the mercurial way of looking at the world, could be very, very difficult. The internet could go down, we could, need to just communicate psychically, and to be ready to not know what's happening next. And to walk in the puddles. We're coming into the rainy time. Make sure we get plenty of water on our skin. Drink plenty of water. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, well, today when we're talking, there's been a lot of rain. So I've been expecting it, and I've been saying to my mum, well, Jupiter and Neptune are coming up together. There might be quite a lot of rain. So maybe we should just think about whether or not we go away.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there could be a lot of rain. Certainly. Well, mind you, there has been a lot of water over New South Wales, hasn't there, in Australia. So we couldn't just say it was Jupiter and Neptune that was bringing it to us here in Aotearoa.
That was around the new moon in Pisces, though. So it was still that Pisces. But yeah, well, that's what fascinates me about astrology, is that you can have, say, a zodiacal sign, and there's the wet, where there's water influence, and psychic and music, and potentially maybe virus. Like, there's all those different expressions within the same. And I think that's what took a while to really appreciate how complex astrology is, because you can get one interpretation of something and then a complete different interpretation, using different qualities of that zodiacal sign or planet, etc. So it's just let's dive in deep, because it's Pisces.
Definitely. Yay. Perfect.
Yeah, I have a South Node. That's all I have in Pisces. So I just go, oh, yep, I've done it before. South Node representing the past life. Yeah. Great. So how can people find you, have a reading with you, learn music?
Yeah, my website, KārenHunter.com, KARENHUNTER.com. That's probably the easiest way. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well, and you're welcome to follow me or contact me there. And I'm on Waiheke Island a lot of the time. I'm also in Auckland, and very easy to contact on Zoom. So
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, and happy.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Awesome Neptune season.
Yeah, exactly. And best wishes to you too for your songwriting and singing and all the things you do. Best wishes for your podcast.
Thank you.
As a music piece today, Karena and I were planning on meeting up and recording something together, but thanks to the dreaded lurgy going around, we were unable to. Instead, I released a song on YouTube that I wrote half a lifetime ago. Karena and I agreed that I would challenge myself by sharing music more on social media, hence the link with the show today. It is a simple recording made on my phone on my back veranda, so I've had to throw my perfectionism to the wind. I wrote this song in the Canadian Rockies when I had first arrived there, fairly fresh out of university, and blown away by how different the mountains were from the Southern Alps here in Aotearoa. Mountains have that gift of aligning me with spirit, and I wrote many songs during that period, with Neptune crossing over several planets in my birth chart. Here is Love is Defined.
Love is defined by the magic of a moment. destination, there's always time to start. Within and around, away near or far. The more you get to know inside, the brighter is the star. Moonlight shines through, a reflection of the sun. With the beauty all around, we truly are all one.
Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowspence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlow Spence and Sarasvati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.